By the time the security guard broke down the gatehouse door, she was slumped in her wheelchair, trembling, shivering, and starving. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, half hidden beneath a tangled mess of hair. Her tiny hands clutched the sides of the chair as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to life. The mansion behind her, glittering, massive, full of laughter and music, was the one place she was forbidden to enter. Her father, Chief Richard Onkwo, billionaire businessman and owner of the largest automobile company in West Africa, was inside celebrating the youngest daughter's 10th birthday. Nobody had heard her cries for help, until now. But before I tell you this incredible story, do me one favor. If you love powerful stories about injustice, courage, and shocking revelations, please subscribe to my channel right now. I create these amazing moral stories every week. Hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's go back to how this nightmare started. It was 3 years ago. The mansion on Victoria Island was the kind of place that sparkled in the night, full of life, music, and laughter. To the outside world, it was perfect. But behind those massive gates, darkness lingered. She was just 7 years old then, the youngest of 3 children, and the one her father never seemed to care about. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind where the city lights flickered against the water, and everything seemed calm. But inside the mansion, a tragedy was about to unfold that would change her life forever. The fires started in the West Wing, a faulty electrical wire, they said later, but no explanation mattered in the chaos that followed. Flames licked the walls, smoke filled the halls, and everyone screamed in panic. Amid the noise, she was trapped, her small body unable to keep up with the adults rushing to safety. Her little heart pounded. She could feel the heat creeping closer, scorching her skin. She tried to crawl, tried to run, tried to call for help, but the fire seemed to mock her, trapping her in its suffocating grip. And then she heard it, the footsteps of her father, Chief Richard Onkwo, coming toward her. Relief flickered in her chest, until she saw the look on his face. Cold. Empty. Indifferent. You're ugly now, he said, his voice sharp and cruel. You'll never be what this family needs. She didn't understand. She had survived the fire, barely, but the man who was supposed to love her now saw her as nothing more than a burden. He didn't hug her, didn't comfort her, didn't even look at the burns on her tiny arms. He merely ordered her away. Before she knew it, she was thrown into a storage room beside the doghouse, a small, dark, suffocating space. Days passed. No food. No water. No comfort. Only the cold floor beneath her and the pain in her body. She could hear laughter and music from the mansion every night, the same sounds that would have been her joy, now mocking her suffering. Hunger became her constant companion. She clawed at the wooden walls, tried to make sense of the cruelty, but no answer came. She was alone. Scared. Broken. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny ember of hope remained. The first few nights were the worst. She screamed. She begged. She cried. Her voice echoed against the walls, but no one came. Her siblings had locked themselves away, afraid of her presence. The servants had been ordered not to enter. And her father, he didn't even glance at the room where she lay, shivering, curled into herself like a fragile bird. Her hands were raw from trying to climb, trying to escape, trying to survive. Her burns throbbed constantly, and sleep was a distant memory. Sometimes, she would whisper to herself, "I will get out. I will be strong. They will see me again." It was during these long, torturous days that she began to understand one simple truth: if she wanted to survive, she had to rely on herself. No one else would help her. No one else cared. And yet, even in the darkest moments, there were small miracles. One night, a rat snuck in through a hole in the wall, and she caught it, not to eat, but because it reminded her that life would find a way, even in the worst conditions. She laughed softly at the absurdity of it, a tiny sound that startled her in the stillness of the storage room. For the first time, she felt alive. Weeks turned into a month. Her body grew weaker, but her mind became sharper. She observed the guards' routines, the pattern of visitors, the shifts in the mansion. She began planning, not just for survival, but for something greater. One day, she would return. One day, she would be seen, not as the ugly, crippled child her father despised, but as someone powerful, someone unstoppable. And then came the day that would change everything. A passerby, a stranger walking near the mansion's backyard, noticed a shadowy figure moving in the darkness. It was her, frail and trembling, but alive. The stranger called the authorities, and within hours, she was rescued and rushed to the hospital. As the ambulance drove away, the mansion loomed behind her, glittering and untouchable. The music, the laughter, the life inside, all of it had gone on without her. But she didn't cry this time. She knew the fire had taken more than her skin, it had taken her childhood, but it had also ignited something else, a fierce, unbreakable determination. In the hospital, the road to recovery was long and painful. She endured skin grafts, surgeries, physical therapy, and countless nights of fear and frustration. But with each scar that healed, each movement that became easier, she felt herself growing stronger. Every doctor, nurse, and stranger who helped her reminded her that the world wasn't entirely cruel. And through it all, she kept one promise: one day, she would return. Not as the helpless child who had been locked away, not as the girl her father had called ugly, but as someone who would reclaim her place in the world. Her journey had begun, not with revenge, not with hate, but with survival. And survival, she realized, was the first step toward justice. After the fire, after the darkness, after being abandoned and left to suffer, she slowly began to find herself again. The hospital became her sanctuary, a place where the world's cruelty could no longer touch her. Nurses and doctors treated her burns, her legs, and her spirit, but it wasn't the medicine that healed her, it was her willpower. Every morning, she looked at her reflection. Her face was scarred, her body fragile, and her legs still weak. Yet, something in her eyes had changed. The same fear that had once consumed her had transformed into determination. She whispered to herself, day after day. I survived fire. I survived cruelty. I will not be broken. Months turned into years. Each session in physical therapy was grueling. She fell countless times, her wheelchair wheels spinning helplessly beneath her, her burns aching with every movement. But with every fall, she rose again, stronger and more resolute. Her body began to heal, but more importantly, her mind sharpened. She studied everything, the routines of people around her, the world that had abandoned her, the ways she could reclaim what had been taken. She learned to speak with confidence, to walk again with assistance, and to plan meticulously. Every scar on her body was a reminder of the pain she endured, but also of the strength she had gained. During this time, she never forgot her father. Chief Richard Onkwo, the billionaire who had once called her ugly and thrown her into the storage room beside the doghouse, continued to live in the mansion, oblivious to the strength growing in the girl he had cast aside. Her siblings carried on with their lives, laughing and playing in the same halls that had been her prison. And she watched from afar, quietly. No anger clouded her vision, only clarity. She knew that revenge wouldn't be blind fury, it would be precision, strategy, and justice. With the help of her grandfather's old letters and hints she had uncovered in the mansion before the fire, she discovered something extraordinary: she was the rightful heir to the Onkwo Empire. Her grandfather, the wise old man whom her father had always disrespected, had left a will naming her as the legitimate inheritor. It was a secret, hidden deep in the legal papers her father had tried to destroy. She smiled for the first time in years, but her smile was not one of joy, it was the calm of someone who had waited patiently for her moment. As she prepared for her return, she trained herself in ways her father could never imagine. Not just physically, but mentally. She learned to command attention with her words, to navigate the world with confidence, to read people's intentions in a glance. Her wheelchair no longer symbolized weakness, it was a symbol of survival and resilience. She returned to the city, walking, with assistance, into the very heart of the world she had been cast out from. The mansion loomed ahead of her, glittering in the sunlight, a symbol of wealth, power, and a life that had been denied to her. But this time, she entered not as a child, not as a victim, but as someone who had outlived pain, cruelty, and betrayal. The first people she confronted were her siblings. They laughed when they saw her, still thinking of her as the weak, ugly girl from years ago. But their laughter died the moment they realized she had returned stronger, smarter, and fully aware of the inheritance that was rightfully hers. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She didn't strike. She simply looked at them with eyes that reflected both sorrow and authority. "You thought I was gone, but I never left," she said softly, her voice calm yet commanding. "Everything you've built here, every lie you've told, every betrayal you've carried out, I know it all. But I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to claim what's mine. And yet, I will forgive." Her siblings froze, realizing that the child they had mocked, abandoned, and betrayed was now the woman in control. The mansion, the empire, and the legacy, all of it belonged to her. Her father, on the other hand, reacted differently. Chief Richard Onkwo, the man who had once thrown her into darkness, could not comprehend what had happened. He tried to assert authority, to reclaim his place, to dismiss her claims. But the law was now on her side, and the documents confirming her inheritance were indisputable. The mansion, once his fortress of pride and control, now belonged to her. Every room, every asset, every symbol of wealth had shifted hands, not through rage, but through justice. And justice did not stop there. Her father's neglect and cruelty were exposed to the authorities. The child he had left to die, the girl he had deemed ugly, had survived, and he would answer for his crimes. Charges of child negligence and endangerment were brought against him. For the first time, he faced consequences for his actions. By the time she returned to the mansion, the girl who had once been trapped, burned, and abandoned was no longer the helpless child her father had thrown aside. She had grown into a woman forged by pain, determination, and resilience. The mansion that had once been a symbol of cruelty now awaited her rightful claim. Her siblings, the same ones who had laughed at her weakness, watched in disbelief as she wheeled into the grand halls. Their eyes widened as they realized that the child they had mocked was now the heiress of everything their grandfather had intended for her. She walked, or rather, wheeled, through the corridors with a quiet confidence. Each step, each turn, each glance reminded them of their betrayal. They had tried to erase her, ignore her existence, and climb to power in her absence. But nothing could erase what was hers by right. Her first confrontation was with her father, Chief Richard Onkwo. The billionaire, who had once ruled the mansion with fear and indifference, now faced a truth he could not escape. You have no right," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I built this empire. I earned this wealth." She looked at him calmly, her eyes steady, reflecting both sorrow and authority. "You were too blind to see me when I needed you," she said softly. "You left me to burn, left me to die, and yet I survived. Everything you thought was yours, has been entrusted to me by my grandfather. The law is clear. The will is clear. And so is justice." Her father's face turned pale. The documents she presented were undeniable, legal proof that she was the rightful heir. The mansion, the company, the legacy, all of it belonged to her. And this time, there was no one to argue, no one to intervene. She had waited, planned, and claimed her destiny. Her siblings, still reeling from the revelation, expected rage, perhaps revenge. But what they didn't expect was forgiveness. "I know what you did," she said, her voice steady yet gentle. "You betrayed me, you laughed at me, and you tried to erase me from this family. But I have chosen a different path. I forgive you." Shock painted their faces. Forgiveness? After all they had done? They had expected anger, humiliation, and retaliation, but she offered grace instead. Her act of forgiveness didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. The power she wielded now was not just the wealth she had inherited, but the control over her emotions, the ability to rise above cruelty, and the courage to show mercy. Her father, however, could not escape the consequences of his neglect and cruelty. Child negligence charges had been filed against him long before her return, and the authorities were ready. He was arrested, facing imprisonment for the years he had abandoned his daughter, leaving her to suffer burns, starvation, and trauma. The same man who had once called her ugly, the same man who had thrown her into a storage room beside the doghouse, now faced the reality of justice. And as he was led away in handcuffs, she felt neither joy nor revenge, only the quiet satisfaction of truth prevailing. With the mansion under her name, she began to rebuild, not just the estate, but her life and legacy. Every scar on her body told a story of survival. Every hardship she endured had shaped her into the woman she had become. The empire was hers, yes, but more than that, her journey had made her resilient, compassionate, and wise. She reached out to her siblings, helping them understand the value of family, loyalty, and trust. They learned, finally, that power without morality is hollow, and that forgiveness can be the ultimate act of strength.